Good morrow, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Fantasy Folk, where we discuss all things in the fantasy genre, from books and games to television and film. My name is Jordan Wiegand, and with me as my traveling companion down these fantastical roads, as always, is Ron. How are you today, Ron?
I'm doing better than Adar. I can tell you that much.
I think many are.
True. But yeah, no, I'm doing great, man. Like, what a finale. We all just got to like the opportunity, the pleasure to watch. There is a ton to break down today, and yeah, I'm beyond stoked to get into it.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. This was a I can't believe we're already here. We started launching this show with the premiere right around the premiere, and we are already done our first show that we're covering, with it being Rings of Power season 2. Hard to believe we're already at the finale. I mean, that happens when you put almost half of the episodes in the
Yeah,
first week, but still,
yeah,
it's flown by.
yeah. No, it really has, man.
Yeah, and look, for the YouTubers, watchers, and stuff, I've got this great fantasy folk T-shirt that you can also find in our. I think it's on our Linktree. There's like a merchandise option that has all of this stuff. You can also buy this flag that's behind me on there too. That's
Hey,
not though. I don't actually have that. This is a CG background.
you can't be giving away the movie magic, brother. Come
Oh
on.
yeah, true. Sorry. Yeah, if people thought this was real behind me, I apologize. We're going to be talking episode 8 of season 2, Shadow and Flame, written by J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, directed by Charlotte Brainstorm, and it aired on Prime Video October 3rd, 2024. And I think we really pride ourselves on getting these episodes turned around pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Um, we watch them on Thursday, we record on Friday, and I try to get these things up Friday night, early Saturday morning. And I'm very excited to see how long we go on this because I have a lot of notes. I have some interviews with JD Payne and Patrick McKay, who are also the showrunners. And Ron, it seems like we're going to get some official season 3 news very shortly here. There was an article going around stating that it's close to renewal, probably next month, official renewal or whatever.
Hmm.
I know from news that had been going around before that they've already hired new writing staff for season 3 and that they have been working on it. I don't know if that means writing episodes or um, arcing, like putting arcs out or whatever, but it sounds like internally it's been renewed. They just haven't officially announced it. Also, apparently at Amazon's upfronts or whatever thing they had recently, they had cast there and they said they only do that for shows that they're continuing. So everything looks to be good and they keep touting numbers for the show. So I think we're in the clear. We're getting season 3. They keep saying Amazon's committed to the 50 episode order, which would be 5 seasons, right? Or
Hmm.
50 hours.
Yeah.
There's 8 episodes, but these episodes are pretty well paced. I
Yeah.
think that is the biggest thing I'm shocked about with season 2. Not that season 1 wasn't well paced. I do think season 1 had a good pace, but I think season 2 has really upped that pacing. Where we were going in the finale kind of last week, thinking we got a lot to touch on,
Yeah.
and we're like, I think we'll see every plot line, and we did. And when I was so thankful when I saw Run that the runtime was like an hour 15 or whatever. I was like, this is great. Like I just want to commend that again. This, and I mentioned on our Penguin episode 2 recap over on Elseworlds as well. These shows have been having longer episodes, things like Penguin, things like this, Rings of Power,
House of the
and
Dragon.
House of the Dragon. And I'm not like trying to throw shade at Disney on that because I do think I am kind of lean more in. I want you to have as long as you need,
Hmm.
but I think there are some shows like The Acolyte where I felt like they needed more time, and I don't know if that's budget stuff. I don't know if it's Disney was aiming for certain length or whatever, but I am just happy that this show doesn't seem to have that stipulation, and they're putting out hour plus episodes when they need to, and other times 45, 55 minutes on the other end. And I think this show is just, this season in particular, has been paced so excellently. Um, this one, I told you as soon as I was done, I was like, this felt like a movie. Like, it
Yeah.
just felt like it felt the vibe I feel, Ron, when I watch the Jackson films. Like,
Yep.
I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, same here, man. It was like it was an hour and 15 minutes, but it felt, you know, it's weird because the old adage is, "Oh, time flies when you're having fun." But this, it felt like a long watch just because we were bouncing around to so many different things. It
Mhm.
felt, despite the fact that it was great and you know you were hooked for every second of it, it's still, it felt like it took its time, and you know, they had a lot to cover, and they covered even more in this episode than we thought they were. You know, we joked about Adar in the beginning of the show, but we were talking last week about, you know, would they start to do the whole orc mutiny thing, rising up against Adar,
Or
and
like next season or something,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
we're
we
like,
talked
yeah,
about
maybe
that. Yeah.
that'll be a slow burn. They're like, no, we're gonna give it to you now. And culminated in the same exact moment we were talking about last week with sort of the parallel to how they killed
Episode 1.
Sauron in the
Yeah.
first episode. But I won't go too deep into the episode specifics because we got a lot to cover. But in terms of the pacing, it's been amazing this season. And I love how this show so far from season 1 to season 2 has just overcome all of the, not only the legitimate gripes people had in terms of the pacings and stuff like that, but also all of that, you know, classic review bombing stuff that we've seen online. Like, it's just everything that was going against this show, it has risen above. And these last 2 episodes, especially, man, they were a level up for real. Like, this is a prestige television show. This is Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? Like, this is a show that people should be flocking to. And I commend everybody who worked on it, especially again these last 2, because it's just been mind-blowingly good. Genuinely, like, this finale was one of my favorite episodes of any television show ever, dude. Like, I was speechless by the time it was over, and hopefully that won't carry over today because that would be a very boring
All right,
podcast.
yeah, we're wrapping it up. Okay,
Yeah, yeah. It was
we're
great. All
speechless.
right, it was cool. It was fun. It was great. Wrap it.
No, I mean, like, I think you articulated that so well. There has been, I've never seen a show recently kind of turn around the audience. I mean, look, there's probably some that just totally tuned out after season 1 and haven't come back, but there are some people that have definitely continued to hate watch or whatever. And then I've seen comments say season 1 was trash, but season 2 is pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that is so great that they had the time to be able to, and because it is funded by Amazon, it was a little bit easier for Amazon to eat that cost.
Yeah.
They also had to pay like 250 million for the rights. So at that point, you're like, we got to get something out of
You
this,
got to
right?
just do it. Yeah, to get a return on your investment. Yeah.
Right. And that's why I do think they will stick with the full 5 seasons. I think they would look as a failure if they didn't, and I think they would want to be like, look, this is what we did. And I think uh, it's been another level this season. It's the narrative have completely flipped on this. I've seen people be like, "This is better than House of the Dragon season 2,"
Yeah.
right? Where people were
I
like,
would
"House of
agree
the
there, by the
Dragon."
way.
I would too. I think people said House of the Dragon season 1 was great. This one sucked, is what a lot of people said, and now people are like, "Well, they're like on reverse course
Yeah, yeah.
at this point."
Yep.
And I think what's funny though, a lot of the same gripes exist with changing the material, but I
Mhm.
feel like they've changed the material for the, I don't want to say for the better, but for the better of the medium
Yeah.
in this show. Um, obviously they're working with a large time frame that they're dealing with, thousands of years in the second age, and they had to truncate that, and I think it works for this show because you can take the best out of those 1,000 years.
Mhm.
House of the Dragon, it's almost in a different spot. Now I don't want to keep going back to that show, but where you're like, they had to truncate the timeline as well a little bit
Yeah.
because of kids and not wanting to cast kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just totally different with the changes that they're making over there. So, just, you know, it's the finale. I wanted to commend the writers and stuff for just turning around the narrative this show has had. I think going into a season 3, this show is going to be more anticipated
Mm-hmm.
for season 3, and I think that's great. I really do think it's about to hit another stratosphere. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, honestly, this was getting season 3 renewed was the biggest one in terms of whether or not this thing was going to reach the finish line. Because you got to think, so this gets renewed for a 3rd season. This one wraps up. Even if people aren't huge on it, it's not going to get canceled after even if it isn't as great as we think this one was. I think this season bought them enough leeway to where it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of like the middle season in between all of them. So maybe maybe it isn't quite as great, but it bought them that time to get another one, even if next season is bad. And then once you wrap up 4, it's like, what are we just not going to do the last season? We're already here practically at the finish line. So coming off what was a mixed reviewed, mixed bag kind of first season, this one had to hit, or else this show was in serious jeopardy. And it hit and then some. So it's great to see, and I'm super stoked for the hype season that's coming up. Even though we know we've
yeah,
got a long time, but all the speculation and all that stuff
we'll
that
get we'll get casting stuff next year. Like
Mhm.
they're gonna, if they're already writing, then they're going to be filming in 2025, and then
Yeah.
they're going to be premiering in 2026. So I
Mhm.
do think, um, there will be a hype season. There will be casting news that people will be following along with, probably more than they were this year.
Mhm.
The last time, well, especially because they started filming season 2 like literally after the finale wrapped on season 1, like in the
Oh
sense
wow.
of like when the finale wrapped premiering. Like it
Yeah,
was, they
yeah.
started filming yesterday of 2022 is
Oh,
when
okay.
they started filming season 2. And then of course, then I don't know if the strikes affected it or whatever, but 2023 it finished filming in June, and then they were turning it around in a
Mhm.
year, uh, like that. So, uh, yeah, if I was Amazon, really, and if I felt really good about this, the way I would do it, and this might sound crazy, I would renew 3 and 4 at the same time and tell them if they could film back to back,
Yeah.
or as close to possible, as close to possible. So that way, then you can kind of give them a break, the cast, and
Mhm.
then you'd be filming season 5 when 4 is airing, and then you have that in the can for the next year or two after that. And I think that's how I would approach it if I was Amazon. Because if you are committed to it and you're like, you know what, do I want 2-year gaps every time? No, like let's just try to film as close as we can.
Yeah.
Is what I would
Lord of the
try.
Rings kind of set that tone too,
True,
right? With the
true.
movies, with filming the back to back, they were like one of the first ones that really did that. So it would be very
It
fitting,
was
very on
cheaper
brand.
for them to do it. It kept
Yeah.
the budget down, and I think it could help for this too. But
Well, yeah,
I
it
I
would do the
think we
same for
will
them.
see maybe not a faster turnaround, but now that they're in the UK and they have their base set up and stuff, I do think it'll be easier production than when they had to move from Australia and New Zealand uh to UK. So I
Yeah.
do think it'll probably be like there's sets they've probably kept,
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
can, that they'll be ready for and all that. So I think
yeah.
that'll help tremendously.
Mhm.
Budget wise as well. All right, so let's get
Yeah.
into the episode then. So I have my notes written out like we usually do of places, and so I
So
am
do I, man.
I
So do
am good. I am good to go. And I look, I had my second age timeline. I brought up maps. I
nice.
have Vanity Fair article with the writers, and I have some Lord of the Rings wiki stuff. So I've got stuff here as well as my own notes on what I wanted to say. But before we get into last week, I do want to bring this up. I forgot to mention this. Instead of going, what did I say? Instead of
There you go.
that,
Yeah. Before we get into this week, you want to go back to something from last week.
yes, yes, exactly. Thank you. The kill Elrond makes, where he kills the orc and then sets off the catapult.
I mentioned that in the episode.
Did you?
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it after. We mentioned it after.
Are you I'm like,
As soon as we press stop. Yeah. And then you mentioned you brought it up on Fandom, Agents of Fandom.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. I forgot I
So
did two episodes on this show last week. Yep.
I wanted to bring that up. I just thought that was a really badass scene.
So
I
funny.
had it in my notes and didn't even talk about it last week. So there you go.
So creative. And it's such a little thing, but it's like that one little thing speaks volumes to the care that is put into the second to second stuff in this season. Cuz like that kind of stuff is what actually, I don't want to say that kind of stuff is what messes with the pacing, but it's more of a microcosm where it's
Mhm.
like every moment is cared for and every moment is like meticulously planned. Whereas last season it was like, yeah, story beat A, story beat B, and yada yada in between. Like this season, it's like every little thing. It feels like it matters.
It felt like Jackson-esque, I want to say. It reminds me of like Legolas doing badass stuff. Like
Yes,
it like when he makes the shield, the skateboard, and he's going down.
yes, yep.
Like it felt very similar to that of just like this really cool action scene that you're like, that was cool. Like, did
Mhm.
we need it? No, but it's fun.
But I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's start with Eregion. This will be most of the stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because what I lumped in with this is the Galadriel Adar stuff, Galadriel Sauron stuff. So I have all of that as well as the Celebrimbor stuff, all in here.
Yeah.
But we start not the episode, but we start the Eregion stuff with Celebrimbor being tortured by Sauron, and this is what is alluded to in the text, and what we thought they were going to do once we learned that Celebrimbor gets those 9 rings out. So in the books, in the appendices, he's being tortured to know where the 3 elven rings are. Because he already has like the 9, and really like the way it is in the books are the 9 and the 7, the whole 16 there are made together, and they're not specifically for the dwarfs and the men.
Oh, it's like, yeah, I made 16, just disperse them amongst
Here's
different
Yeah,
groups. Okay.
yep. I like that they did it this way instead. What I think I read is that the authors of like the writers said that they were going more with like the poem of like the
Mm,
3 to the elven kings under the sky, right, and then the
9 to
7
the
to the
men
dwarf
doomed
lords.
to die. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Like
yeah.
last week's episode was called. So I like that they did it this way, and I think it was cool that they were able to still fit in the torturing stuff. But like I've been seeing a lot of people say like we've been talking about Sauron being a master manipulator, but this is very like abusive relationship, right? Where he's like, look at what you've done to yourself.
Yeah.
All I have done has been for you.
For you,
Like,
just a
it's
gaslighting motherfucker to
gaslighting.
the end, man.
Yeah.
He really,
They did it so well. And I want to just give, take a bow, Charles Edward and Charlie
yeah,
Vickers.
man.
Charles Edwards and Charlie Vickers just have killed it this season.
That scene in particular, it was so powerful. First of all, huge jump scare, like when it just cuts right to like Celebrimbor sitting. Like the first time we see
Yeah.
any of them in this episode, he's just like sitting there on the ground, just pelted full of arrows, and another one gets him. Like totally was not ready for that, but it was just like whoa. And I feel
And
like it was like,
Sauron's like firing them emotionless too. He was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it was kind of good the way they did that because it caught you off guard a little bit. You kind of knew things weren't going to go well for Celebrimbor, and we saw how last episode ended with like his entire Elven Guard, being forced to kill each other by Sauron and stuff. But it was definitely a jarring thing to just cut right to that shot of Celebrimbor sitting there. And I also loved in that scene too that Celebrimbor got a little bit of redemption in the end because he
yes.
finally got under uh, Anatar slash Sauron's skin. Like he starts telling him about how the rings are going to basically be his downfall. They're going to consume him, and there's one
I
in
have the quotes
particular.
here. I have the
Okay,
quotes here if you want me to read them. So,
sure.
your only craft is treachery.
Hmm.
So pure it shall betray the very hand that forges it.
Mm-hmm.
Hear the dying words of Celebrimbor. The rings of power shall destroy you, and in the end I foresee one alone shall prove your utter ruin.
Bars.
No, you are the prisoner, Sauron, Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Almost like a sarcastic moniker in that. You know, it's like when you
Yes.
normally when you hear or anything up to now when you've heard like the Lord of the Rings, it's felt like it's supposed to be this not prestigious, but like this powerful,
Well,
heavy title.
yeah, earlier in the season, right when Sauron comes to him as Anatar and says, "You will be the Lord of the Rings." It's
Mm,
a honorary title. Patrick McKay actually talked about it in that interview I talked about. He says the two poles of the story are "You're the Lord of the Rings." No, you're the Lord of the Rings. It has a changed meaning. The first time it's an honorary title being bestowed. The second time it's sort of a death sentence in a way.
so,
This is what
yeah,
the season's about. The fate of the world is being decided by two people in a room.
yeah.
Thought that was
And then
really cool how he said that.
Sauron's like, "What do you mean? What is a hobbit gonna come and take into the and destroy me? Get real, Celebrimbor." No,
What even is a hobbit? We don't have hobbits
yeah,
yet.
we only have Harefoots, but
And stores.
in stores, yeah. We'll get to them in a little bit, but yeah, man, just I loved that Celebrimbor got to have that, and he got a little bit of that last week too. He got a little bit of his redemption when he sort of reclaimed his sanity and was able
And when he
to
tries to throw them in the fire,
yeah,
which again would have probably destroyed the rings if they didn't have Sauron's blood. That's kind of what
blood.
we were speculating that, and that's something again that's not in the text, but I think it is really cool that they added that in there. Maybe that's how he kind of gets the idea of making the One Ring
Yeah,
and adding that in there. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I wonder too, like with this wording of what he's saying, and I foresee one alone shall prove your utter ruin. I find that interesting then that he would then create the One Ring, unless if it's like he thinks the Elven rings are the ones that'll be his downfall, so he needs to create one to be able to control all of them. And then that becomes the one that proves his downfall, or like I feel like these words have to be haunting Sauron at this point.
I almost feel like he is going to make the One Ring now purely out of spite because he
Mm.
has this hubris and this I'll show you sort of attitude. It's almost like, oh, okay, you think that again, I don't even it's tough. We don't know right now if he's like got the plan to craft the One Ring in his mind because later in the episode he even throws a quote out there. Galadriel's like, has this been your plan all along? And he's like, you what does he say? He's like, you think too much of me. I got it written down here. What am I doing? The road goes ever winding, and not even I can see all its paths. So who knows? Maybe this is a thing where it's, Celebrimbor's comments about one will destroy you or one will be your downfall is what spurs him to create the One Ring because he's like, oh, one of these rings is going to be my downfall. Actually, I'll just create one ring that controls them all. Like, so
Right,
it
right.
could be, Celebrimbor's dying moment could actually be what spurs him to create the item that leads to his downfall that he prophesized in his last moment. Just like, woo,
And they show him with Feanor's hammer, don't they?
yes,
Yeah, so it seems like he's now going to use the hammer to create the
mhm.
One Ring. Is
Yeah.
what I would assume as
He's
well.
after Galadriel goes off the cliff, he's like
Yeah,
kind of twiddling it in his hands. Yeah,
yeah. So that's cool. So that's you know, he's now learned enough from Celebrimbor where he's going to be able to maybe go ahead. Because do you think he does cry when he kills Celebrimbor? Is it like I've seen some speculate? Obviously, it's tears of his own, like where he's crying for himself, right? Like because his plan didn't go right, or because he kind of pities himself in that regard, not so much, right? Because we don't think that he's actually sad Celebrimbor is dead, though he does say he did enjoy their time together. I do think he's honest with that because
mhm.
it did teach him the stuff he needs to use, right? But um, yeah, just interesting that he was like crying before Glug and them kind of come in.
Well, I think honestly, I do think he was crying over Celebrimbor, and again, it ties back into the fact that he really just sort of believes his own propaganda so much that like he probably views Celebrimbor as like one of his quote unquote children. You know what I mean? Just like one of his uh, essentially the one who's responsible for kicking all of this off and like basically being the catalyst for Sauron's re-emergence to power, with crafting the Elven rings and all that. So I honestly do think that in some weird fucked up way, he actually was sad that he died in that moment. Like, I don't think that he's got sympathy for, everybody in Middle Earth and on this world, that he would see to be his children. But in this one, where he builds this sort of, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like when you grow like kind of close to your captor, sort of thing. What is that called again?
Yeah, the I just Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome, but like
Yeah.
reversed almost a little bit, where it's like in all this time he spends gaslighting and abusing this person, comes to like love them in a very demented, warped way. And this is not me justifying him by any
Right,
means, by the way.
right, right.
This is just me trying to get into his mind a little bit and see where those tears came from, because they were definitely, it was a moment that stopped you in your tracks a little bit. You weren't expecting it.
Yeah, yeah. The and Celebrimbor's dead. They kind of do the thing where they like not really parade his body, but like he does have the pole and hoisted up a bit.
And
Um,
Charlie Vickers did say he hopes we get that next season. So
yeah,
fingers
and
crossed.
the writers in the article I mentioned, they kind of allude to like they didn't want to do it this season. They don't know if they'll do like they wanted to make it a more intimate moment between the two
Yep,
these two,
100%.
but they won't rule out like maybe that being a thing later. But it seemed like they were more hesitant to go that approach. We'll see, right? I don't think they're going to give it all away like that. So
I very much I agree with the decision, and I
me
think it
too.
would have
Me too.
taken away from that moment if they had, given us that this moment where by the time the scene's over, you're like, Jesus Christ, I need to exhale, and then to just kind of
Yeah.
throw it all away with that, it would have felt a little anticlimactic. I think if anything, if you hold off and do it like maybe end of next season, like maybe he digs up his body or something as a way to like mess with like the elves and everything, because we're definitely going to war next season. We know that. We won't skip too
Yeah.
far ahead. But as sort of a tactic he'll use in war, where it's like, okay, Sauron's been pushed over the edge now. We know that he cared for Celebrimbor, but now he's parading him around on a, you know what I mean, on a post to try to get in Galadriel and Elrond and Gil-galad's heads, sort of thing. So I think it'll be way more effective if they do it next season, to just show how Sauron is straying further and further away from even this, even as warped as it is, still this kind of, again, it's tough. I don't want to say like this small shred of humanity he has, but maybe like emotion would be the best way to put it, because even though it's misguided, it's still emotion. So it just kind of it'll be a good representative of him moving away from that once and for all, and just becoming the cold. He already is this, but you get what I'm saying. I'm trying to tiptoe around it because I don't want to make it seem like I'm like justifying Sauron or making it seem like he's a good guy now.
No,
But
no. I think. Yeah. I
there's
think.
further to go with it, is what I'm saying, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. No. The I could see that maybe of them like, or even if it's like at the beginning of next season, like they're exiting Eregion and they're carrying his body out, type, like
Yeah.
hoisted up like that as they're
Mhm.
walking away. That's something that can be done, I think. And you don't probably even have to get Charles Edwards back. It could be like a
Give him another payday. Get him in there. Come
yeah, yeah,
on.
yeah. I'm saying like a lot of
I know, though.
times
Yeah.
those type of body things are just like a mold and not
You
like
could
actually the
have a
person.
prosthetic made, yeah, and it would
Right,
serve the
right,
same
right.
purpose. Yeah.
Especially with how much they'll have to like probably dirty him up and
Yeah.
stuff like he was in this. They could probably get away with that a bit.
Big time.
Um, but yeah, so I just wanted to shout out Charles Edwards again, just because he's probably one of my favorite characters, Celebrimbor, and it's sad that this is how we leave him. But also Charlie Vickers, again, he does these acting with just like little facial ticks and
Mhm.
his eyes, and like we saw, I think last week or in a few weeks, where like he is laying on the charm, and then maybe the character turns away and his eyes just kind of go dead or whatever, like he is
Yeah.
over it. And
Mhm.
he does it again here where he just has like this anger when Celebrimbor's getting under his skin, right? And it's not something we usually see Sauron getting angry. He's usually pretty reserved and in control. Um, so I thought that, just really great. I'm gonna miss these two going at it, in the next season.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to kind of put a bow on the scene in particular, it was funny because, or not funny, but
Like, haha,
Sauron.
funny or ironic?
Yeah, yeah, like Sauron told him, like, basically in no uncertain terms, that he wasn't going to kill him right then. He was going to torture him for a long time. And it took him getting under his skin for him to just be like, okay, and have that moment where he just like loses control for a second, and and in the process loses any chance of getting any more information out of Celebrimbor. So,
That's why I
well,
was wondering if he was crying in the sense of like, man, I really
mm,
effed that up. Like that was like, what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I can't even get the thing I was looking at now because I snapped. And I think that's Celebrimbor's plan was, if I'm going to be here being tortured the whole time, I'm going to make him kill me so it can
yeah,
finally stop, right?
yeah,
Like, and I think that was perfect by Celebrimbor.
agree.
So the orcs get in and they capture the we'll get to there actually. Let's go to Galadriel. Galadriel escapes with some other elves, but they're actually at the exit of this cave that goes through the mountain. The orcs are waiting. And
Immediately caught again.
yep, immediately caught again. And she says, "Hey, I give you 9 reasons why you can, take me to your leader, essentially." And they take her over to Adar. I did think that was a little odd because I didn't think Adar knew about the 9 rings.
Yeah.
But so when they're like, "Dude, she's got 9 rings," he's probably like, "What?
And
I have this one."
this was also a moment that confused me a little bit because I wasn't sure.
If they were taking her to Sauron or Adar.
No, well,
Oh, okay.
yes, I had thought that later
Me
after
too.
you see the scene with Gluck going up there after he kills
Yeah, yeah.
Celebrimbor. But I was, I don't know, it felt a little silly for Galadriel to just throw it out there that she had the 9 rings.
Yeah.
I understand she was in a situation where she was going to be captured either way there. Like, it was just a matter of whether it was by force and all these other elves get killed in the process or not. But it felt a little odd to throw that out there so quick, to be like, "Oh, I have these, so you have to take me to your." It's like, it feels like they were probably going to take you to their leader either way. Like, it just, I don't
Right.
know. It was a small little nitpick, but it was one that kind of was like, she threw that out there a little quick.
Unless if she actually thought they were going to kill her, because he was willing to kill her after Elrond didn't give the ring
True.
last time, right? So like maybe that's her only thought there, but again, I'm not sure how he would know anything about the 9. So
Mhm.
unless if it's like going to be relayed to him of, "Hey, you have her 1 ring, she's got 9 more," and he's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, sign me up, bring her over."
I don't need
uh
Lord of the Rings.
so he's wearing her ring. And I want to correct myself from last week because I said this is the ring that becomes Gandalf's. I was wrong. This is
Oh,
they're named similarly. This ring is the one that will go to no, this is the ring that goes to her. This is her ring, right? And then Elrond's ring is currently in Gil-galad's hands, and Gandalf's ring is in Círdan's. So
Círdan. Yeah.
wanted to correct myself there because I was thinking about it earlier and I was like, I was totally off on that. That's my bad. Um, but yeah, so he's wearing the ring, and we get to see what Adar looked like before he kind of got corrupted and looks like whatever you would want to call it. If it's scars, if it's battle worn, his orc looking face, whatever.
Yeah,
And as
yeah.
soon as he takes off that ring, though, it starts immediately coming back. I thought that was a really cool visual.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little bummed at what immediately followed because I thought we were getting like sort of the Adar babyface turn, to equate it to wrestling terms. I it was he kind of got that small little ounce of redemption. And even he mentions about how what does he say? Adar is the name that he earned, and he wanted to re-earn his old name. You know, his name when he still had that shred of humanity and wasn't just this cold killer, basically.
Right.
Um, and it sucks because if he had had this realization a day sooner, he probably would have still ended up being alive. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until the storming of Eregion where he was just throwing his orc children out there as cannon fodder that Glug was like, you know what? Actually, I'm just gonna get everybody here and we're gonna form a mutiny against you. So it just turned a little too late, unfortunately, but was a very satisfying ending, I would say, to kind of have him come to the realization. It feels like that's actually, Celebrimbor had a bit of the same thing too, like kind of came to the realization at the last. And Durin, actually, it seems like that's kind of a theme with the deaths in this episode. Now that I'm talking about it, these characters who were sort of blinded by the rings in one way or another, coming to their senses in their final moments before their death, ultimately.
Very reminiscent of 2012 Ravens locker room here, and Adar is Cam Cameron as they are staging the mutiny to get Kubiak in there. Yeah, no, it was it is interesting with Adar because I do want to say that there's been speculation on, okay, who is Adar, right? Like
Mhm.
he's got to be like an older elf that is even older than Galadriel doesn't recognize who he is, right?
Mhm.
In the Vanity Fair article, they kind of said like him saying that name doesn't matter right now, like is true. Like there is they don't have like this special canon
Yeah.
character that this guy secretly is. It
No.
is just this guy is Adar. His previous elf name doesn't really matter in the sense of it's not a big reveal. So I want people to like not worry about speculating on
Yeah.
like, is this elf? Is it this elf? Like,
Well, now we know we don't have to because he did.
yeah, right. But I think some people would still wonder, like, oh, did that elf turn bad and become Adar, right? But
Yeah.
it's pointless. It was just a character that they wanted to use an elf that had, because as they mentioned, one of the ways in the Tolkien legendarium when it comes to turning into orcs is elves turning bad, dark elves, and they kind of created Adar as like a middle ground between elves, dark elf, and then orc, right? Like, so they were trying to create that as like a thing, and then making him the father of the orcs to help that transition into it. But like Tolkien never really settled on which of like the three or more origin
Like what
stories for the orcs.
subcategory he fits into. Yeah, he's sort of androgynous. Is that I don't know, I think that's probably the wrong way to put it.
What that meant was like, Tolkien had like three or four different orc origins, and they kind of leaned in with like the dark elf one, and they kind of created him as like being the bridge
Oh,
to it.
okay. I see what you're saying.
And but like Tolkien never said like this is the for sure way that this happens,
Okay.
right? Like so they were kind of just doing that. I was like, we'll take one of these and we'll create a cool story that we want to do with that, and that's what led to this.
I
So
was thinking D&D, like these are all different elf subclasses.
yeah. It is funny because I always grew up thinking they were the Dark Elves, and I guess I had read that somewhere, and it turns out that was never the official canon thing into turning into an orc anyway. So just wanted to bring that up. But he's wearing the ring. He takes it off, immediately starts turning back into himself. And I do want to give props to this actor too. I don't have his name right now, but I do want to just say I think I thought Adar was really cool last season too with Benjen Stark. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy's good. But I do think this guy did a hell of a job. So so much so that I do not miss season one Adar. Like I think he is kind of like when I try to think back to what he looks like in season one, I keep picturing this guy. So
Same.
it's worked for me. I think he brings a whole cool level to it. I think it's worked well.
Yeah, and knowing us too, anytime you can replace a Game of Thrones character in our head canon, you're doing something right. So, or
Yeah, yeah.
A Game of Thrones actor, I should say, not a Game of Thrones character. But yeah, no, he did a great job, man. It's one of those things in shows. It's like the best time to kill a character is when you're dying for more. You know what I mean? It's better to kill them at their height than it is to kill them off when you're kind of like, okay, when you can either see it coming or when you're starting to get sick of them. So it was a
Yeah,
great way to do it here.
I was worried they would stretch this out too much.
Yeah.
So it being in this episode, I'm like, great. That's a 2-season Adar arc. I feel
Hmm.
great about it.
Hmm.
It would have felt silly if like next season you just see Glug and then being like, I still don't like that he's doing that. Like I think
Yeah.
it paid off that it was this episode. So
Yeah. Yeah. It just, again, it speaks to the pacing being much better in this season overall. So,
yeah, and we with this, right, we have Glug who had seen him, like you mentioned before, at the after Celebrimbor dies, and he says, "Are you Sauron?" And he says, "I have many names." Right? What's yours? And he learns of Glug. And did this work on you? Did you think Glug actually did like get hurt trying to stick up to Sauron for Adar, or did you know this was like a double
no.
crossing thing?
Oh, total double cross. Yeah.
Yeah,
Total
yeah,
double cross.
that's how I
Yeah.
felt too.
I think right. Um, when him and Adar, when Glug and Adar had that moment in the last episode where I forget what exactly the exchange was.
They were sending Damrod, the
Right.
troll, out there, and he was like, he's going to kill our own kind as well. And he's kind of
Yeah.
like, whatever, right?
Whatever. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's
I
exactly
think.
that was word for word.
Yeah. Just do like the kids do today and say whatever. Paul Blart, great movie. But yeah, I think that was the moment where Glug kind of made up his mind that, all right, we're gonna try out something new here, and he did. And unfortunately, it ended for him the same way it ended for Adar.
Yep, the end of Glug. It's right after the Galadriel Sauron fight. Let's talk about just the end of Glug right now too. So Glug has this. He's hurt, right? It's too late, and Adar's actually hurt. Adar is like feels bad for his child here, right?
Mhm.
But it is a little too late
Yeah.
in that regard, and that's kind of what Glug says. Too late. He pulls the call an ambulance, but not for me meme, right? We need to do that. We need to superimpose Glug's
Yes, we
face
do.
on that meme. Oh my god. So he stabs him, and then, like you said earlier in the episode, it is like a total mirroring of the premiere. As our favorite George Lucas said, it's like poetry, it rhymes, right?
It
So
rhymes.
yeah, Jar Jar's the key to all of this. Who is that in this? Is it like Glug is the key to all this, or is it like
Theo.
Nori?
Theo.
Theo. He's the key to all this. He's the witch king of Agmar.
Yeah.
So yeah, we get Glug pulling that. They have the crown. Sauron's there to take it. He says they're not children anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and he's going to interact with Galadriel. But after this, just to wrap up Glug, Glug comes up. This did shock me. Glug just comes up like, "Hey man, maybe we like if we do that, some of the blah blah." Sauron just stabs him, and
Yeah.
the other orc, whoever played the other orc, did a hell of a job too because he did like a
It's like, yeah.
whoa,
All
and
right,
then
sir.
like, yeah,
Please, Mr.
Lord
Gardak,
Sauron,
you
I
can bring us home.
apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I guess,
but
we
Glug
should.
was great too. I just want to say I thought the fact that I know an orc's name and like
Yeah.
all that is great.
No, I agree. Again, it was kind of a funny way to put it last week, but it sort of humanized the orcs in that way. He was kind of the face, the poster boy of that. It sort of gave them an identity outside of just these mindless brutes that just follow Sauron's every word. And we know that's what they're going to end up being, but it's cool that we're going to get to see that sort of, I guess,
Transition.
deterioration.
Yeah.
Yeah, for transition, deterioration, whatever, however you'd like to put it. But
Yeah.
I guess we should talk about, we're kind of hovering around the whole Galadriel stuff, and
Yeah.
now we're talking about what, Glug being murdered. What caused that was Sauron's anger, sadness. I don't know what you'd want to call it, over Galadriel. Essentially, I don't know if you could even say it on YouTube, but was basically like took her own life so that Sauron uh, couldn't get these rings, right? Or
Sacrificing herself while also totally friend zoning him or
yeah,
enemy zoning him, right? Like he says this great line of like, I would have made you my queen, or right, or I
mm-hmm.
would have, all this kind of stuff. And I think it shows that Sauron actually did love her in that way, and
Mm-hmm.
was like, even if it's not like an actual love, but like a love, like
It's like the
a love.
Celebrimbor thing, man. It's this weird, like, way that he construes love in his head, and it's fucked
It's
up.
like a,
But it's
a love of the power of her, right? Like, you are on my level type of thing,
mm,
and I would make you my queen. It may not even be that he's interested like sexually with her, but like we fit so well. We could be king and queen,
yeah,
ruling this world. And he actually meant it. And she denies him, and it looks like she's going to give him the ring, but she like just jumps, right?
yeah,
And this is after she was stabbed with the crown, which, by the way, really cool fight. The fact that he has the
awesome.
crown as just like how he's fighting while
Uses it
she's
like
using the
to catch the
sword.
sword and everything, dude.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then
sick.
uses it to stab. Like, it was really cool that's how, and the fact that he's changing shape throughout this, right? Like, he changes to Halbrand, and she kind of is taken aback.
Yeah, changes to her.
Changes to her, and then Celebrimbor.
Yeah,
Uh, and then back into Anatar, or Sauron. And yeah, she jumps off. He does get the 9 here, right?
yes, yes.
And
I misspoke before. Not to prevent him from getting the rings. The ring, her ring, is what I was
her
referring
ring that he has
to.
yet to have touched, and that again is very crucial on, like, those 3 rings can be used right now without any effects. Now that won't always be the case. When he does create the 1 ring, these people will not be able to use them anymore. The elves will
Yeah,
not be able to use them anymore. So um that's how it currently stands. And that's good, because when she falls off this cliff here and everybody's watching her fall, um the only way they heal her is with the rings, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And Gil-galad is having trouble healing her with just 1, and this is where Elrond finally trusts Galadriel and says, "You know what? I have to take this leap, pretty much, and put the ring on to
Mhm.
save her life."
Yeah.
And it makes sense now. We were wondering in the like first week, we were wondering, how is he going to transition to actually wearing it, because we do know he will wear a ring.
Mhm.
This is how he gets uh he gets like the okay, because he needs to do it to save her, and he like trusts her. He sees that she pretty much probably jumped to avoid Sauron, so he knows it can't really be that, like, that it can't really be affected, right? That's kind of what I think from it too. He sees what she did, and it's like, okay, if that was really tainted, she wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah. Great wide shot too, by the way, when they show her falling while they're all like looking from inside of Eregion.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah, I do think the elves would be able to see that or tell it's her too, because like if you think about, I think it's Two Towers. Aragorn asks Legolas, like, "What do eyes, your elven eyes see, or whatever?"
Their
Right? Like,
senses are much more keen.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they can see further, all that stuff. So
And she's got the all white on, or not exactly, or was she wearing? It's like a light gray / white. It's a
it's
very
yeah, it's
noticeable palette.
close to the Lothlorien look from the Jackson films, right?
Mm,
Like how she's
yes.
wearing white in those. Like it looks more resemblance to that than like what she was wearing the first two seasons,
Mm.
or
Side
like
note,
the
by the
first
way,
season and a half.
when she first wakes up after she's been cured, that was such an intentional. Did you notice the filter was very soft and
Yeah.
sort of like fairy-esque? Very much was a callback to kind of the what we see when she's talking to Frodo
Yes.
in Fellowship and
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
Like just has
That's what
that
I thought too.
exact same like softish filter. I think that was totally intentional and it was really cool.
Yeah, they do a lot of callbacks to not only the books but to the Jackson films. The
Mhm.
Balrog design, something that the Stranger has, we'll get to, right? But yeah, they do a lot of good callbacks to that. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and then the dwarves arrive, right? But
Yes.
before that, also the orcs are burning
Dwarves.
Celebrimbor's. The orcs are burning Celebrimbor's work, and um, we kind of get like the writers keep equating this to the Library of Alexandria, which if people
Yes.
don't know was an actual event where a library that had in Alexandria that had a lot of our histories was lost, and some of those books did actually have backup copies in other libraries in the world, but a good chunk of it was lost, and that's just human history that we do not know about. And it's kind of equated to that here of this is Celebrimbor's work. This is everything he's done. This is the history of Eregion, pretty much, and it's completely lost.
Yeah, dude, it's centuries worth of magic and smithing progress and knowledge that's just gone. I'm glad I didn't know that they had said that's what they were equating it to
Yes, that's what they were.
because
Yep.
that's exactly what I thought of, like the real world applications of like
Yeah.
in history, how many of these societies that lived and prospered and then were wiped off the face of the earth that just we'll never know about all the progress that they made because it was just lost to time. And this was very much one of those things too. It was a gut punch. You really felt it because it was also equally Celebrimbor's whole legacy is now he still lives on in the in the Galadriels and the people that knew him, but just it was kind of like salt in the wound a little bit of like not only is he dead, but his life's work is now gone too, and it was
And what
it's
he's
really
most
a gut
known
punch.
for,
Yeah,
now is being a fool and letting
yeah,
Anatar corrupt him into creating these rings.
yeah,
That's his legacy now, right? I
yeah, man.
mean, it's
And
tough.
for such a wise and great elf, like yeah, it's tough. It was like I just to reiterate, it was a gut punch.
And then, like I said, the dwarves arrive, so everything's good there. We'll leave the elves there. We're gonna rewind, and we're gonna move to Moria if you're ready
Okay,
to
let's do it.
talk Moria and talk the dwarves.
Let's do
So
it.
the first part of this episode, before the titles even, really cool cold open, was
Mhm.
King Durin still digging. And I really like the way that they shot this too with like the blurriness where you can't tell what's going on. You're kind of thrown in this thing and you're like, oh, where are we? Moria. Okay. And oh, Deeza's tending to this guy as Prince Durin comes in and all that. It was really cool opening. King Durin is there digging, and they have this great exchange with Prince Durin and King Durin where they're going back and forth of, you are the strongest man I know. Just take off the ring, like you can do it. Nobody else
You
can
used to
probably.
let me lift my hand off just a little bit.
Yeah, and he's trying to stop his father from keep digging. He gets through, and then that's when we do see the Balrog has awoken, and it then hits the King Durin that Prince Durin was right, and he does end up taking off the ring. But they have this great exchange too, where he's trying to tell him how strong he is. He's like, "I know you would let me win, Dad. Like you would let me get a little close to winning, and then you would win." And King Durin, before he dies and before he jumps and attacks the Balrog, says, "I never actually like loosened up, right? Like I never actually let you raise your arm. You actually did that. that was you getting stronger and you getting better. And he actually says, like, you're the strongest of us, right? Like,
Mhm.
and just this great heartfelt thing where they've been on ice since last year or two. They had cold relationship to each other, and he actually calls him king, like, now you're king, type
Yeah,
of thing. Um, he like leaps up. It's this really great shot of him going at the Balrog and gone.
amazing.
That's great.
Although we do have kind of a Viserys situation on our hands now because no one heard him call him the king, and now we're gonna have this whole power struggle. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, because
No, it
this,
is interesting because I don't even really remember them mentioning a brother that much, except
yeah,
for
no,
maybe like I think in season one, Prince Durin says like there's other brothers you could have picked or whatever. Like,
feels
whatever.
very Euron Greyjoy, like just kind of popping up.
And in the books, this isn't really a thing, right? Like
Okay.
we've talked about how Durin is the king all the time, and it's not usually like there's always a Durin. There's no like battle or like political stuff about the
Mhm.
king stuff. So they have kind of free reign with that. We'll see what they do with it. Um, it's interesting. I think it can be interesting, not just because it's like I don't want to say it's not in the book, so it's not good. Like there's a lot of stuff they've done not in the books that have been good. So
Yeah.
wide open.
Yeah. No, it's going to be interesting, but yeah, just to circle back to this scene, it was very powerful. And again, not to reemphasize, but it seems like the common themes among the deaths in this episode was, you know, coming to your senses and realizing that these rings are trouble, and now we kind of have this interesting situation ahead of us because the closing shot of the Moira of it all is after they have this conversation, it pans over and you just see the 7 dwarven rings sitting there. So this thing's a powder keg heading into next season. Now we've got all these rings up for grabs with the dwarves and no steady hand, no established steady hand leading them now that Durin
And does
killed
he
her.
wear one? Like he kind of looks at it like, how do I get rid of this brother issue? Right? Like,
I think he's going to, and I will admit I hope they don't send Durin down the bad path. I feel
right,
like
right,
it would reverse all of the stuff that that's been established about him this season and that we've
yeah,
come to love about him, that he's been able to basically keep a step above this stuff and not give in to the temptation. So even if he does wear the ring, I hope it's a thing where like he's actually able to do it like the elves are, where it's like he's able to harness the power without it corrupting him until the One Ring forms. Because we know ultimately once Sauron does create the One Ring, that it's kaputs for all those dwarven rings. So
yeah. I wonder if maybe he's thinking I can use the rings to buy off my brother, or I give them to the lords to get their support
yeah.
for being king. It could be something like that. It could be I got to destroy them so they don't get in my brother's hand. It could be a lot. Like, there's a lot of ways they could go about it. So
Mhm. And I think I've mentioned this in an older episode too, but I do love how distinct the designs of the rings are
yeah,
between, like, the elven rings very much feel like their own thing. The rings of man right now are just literal bands. Like there's no stone on them or anything like that. And then you've got these dwarven rings with just these massive rocks, you know
yeah,
what I mean? Purple and blue and red and like just these huge rings. And I think it gives them all a very distinct feel and identity. I love it.
yeah. So Durin's brother is going to fight the claim for the throne. So there you go. That's where we're left off with the dwarfs.
Basically, yeah, that's yeah.
Let's go to Numenor
Let's do it. I'll fire up the
because I
boat right now.
I have the last stuff being like the stores and the stranger and stuff. So
Mhm.
we'll go to Numenor. There's not a lot that happens here. All faithful are outlawed, and we wondered how that would happen after Tar Muriel was actually granted innocent from the lake monster thing. Well, it turns out that they find out that the elves had teamed up with Sauron.
Mhm.
And I want to be fair to Farazan here. He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, I hate to say it.
play out the way that they think, but Sauron fooled the elves, of course. But when the faithful are faithful to the elves, and it turns out the elves just battled against Adar with Sauron, and the word gets back about that, it's not a good look. So they end up having to like hunt down all the faithful, and we get Eregion going to warn Elendil.
Yeah, she's like, okay, maybe I've made some missteps here and have backed the wrong horse, so to speak. And it was cool that she had that moment to warn him. Also, though, I think the biggest, maybe it's sort of a personal, biggest, but I think the most interesting part to come out of the Numenor end of this episode is none other
Narsil.
than Narsil, finally, which we know is going to end up being the ring that chops off Sauron's fingers and ends up
The
getting
sword.
shattered, yada yada. Yeah, Aragorn ends up getting the sword that Elrond forges for him out of the shards. So it's just another one of those really awesome Lord of the Rings, and the music that played when
Mm-hmm.
Muriel hands it to him. Again, I know we're kind of jumping around a little scatterbrained right now, but I just once we mentioned Numenor, I wanted to get that one right off the top of the
I
rip.
mean, that was my next
And,
note pretty much,
okay,
because
cool.
there's not much that happens in Numenor.
Yeah.
But I do think they're clearly showing again, Tar Miriel is somebody that Elendil has some feelings for. Again, he
Mhm.
kind of mentions like, "What is it
You're
all
not
worth
letting this
if
go,
you're
are you?
not going with me?" Right? No, I'm not letting it go. He's like, "What am I supposed to do if you're not with me?" Type of thing, And she's like, "Go. Here's
Matchmaker
Narsil.
Jordan over here.
Here's a sword." She gives him a present, and he takes the sword. We do know, yes, that is the sword. Uh, and he also mentions his other son. We are getting Anarion. I
Yes.
mentioned it before. I thought maybe Earion was going to be their version of Anarion, but no. Anarion, he says he's in the west of Numenor. So he's heading over there.
He's going even
Uh,
further west. Yeah.
yes,
So we're
which
not
is
gonna
good.
we're not
We're
gonna
not
get
going to
our
get the
ships
meme.
passing in the night. We're
No,
not gonna get it, unfortunately.
I thought maybe we were going to get it, and then I had to think like, oh no, he's going west. So I do think eventually, when Isildur does come and he finds out where his dad is gone, he's going to go team up with his brother and
Yeah.
him, and Earion's probably going to head over there unless she dies, and that'll be.
I could see her dying and being like maybe Farazan and Kemen like catch her being a quote unquote traitor, so to speak, and like it'll stoke that fire even that hatred even more. And it'll make it that much more satisfying when Farazan ends up being taken down.
Yeah, I agree. So we have that was the main gist of Numenor. Let's go to Pelargir because that
Okay.
is related to the Numenor storyline, and an unexpected character popped up in that. I was not expecting Kemen to arrive, but before we get there, Theo is saying goodbye to Isildur. So I was wondering if we'd see Theo again.
Mhm.
Yes, we will. It seems like he will have a role to play because Pelargir is going to become not a settlement anymore, but now a outpost or a for
Basically
Numenor.
a prison camp, for lack of a
Yes.
better term. Just going to be working, cutting wood, and providing supplies to the Numenorian army. So, yeah, I will say it was kind of funny though when Kemen rolls up and he's
Yeah.
big swinging dick, and he walks and he looks and it's like, oh shit, and he has that
Yeah.
moment where he sees Isildur, and it was just like, oh, and it was this sort of like weird tension, but like trying to play it off like, hey, buddy, long time no see. And then within seconds, that thing devolves, and Isildur finds out basically pretty quickly what he's missed in the last
Yep.
weeks or months or however long it's been at this point, because I don't even know. But yeah, it was a good way to get all that in, because like we were kind of curious how Isildur was going to fit back into the Numenor storyline. And you could sit there all day and try to craft ideas on how you can work it around, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, you do this and this one interacts with that, and the whole time it's like, oh, actually, Kemen's just going to sail up and he's going to tell him. Sometimes the
Yeah.
easiest way is the best way, and I think that they saved themselves a lot of time and moved that story forward, which I haven't been the biggest fan of this season. I feel like they saved themselves a lot of time by just having that moment, and now going into next season, there is actually interesting story arcs, I feel, coming out of Numenor,
Yeah.
which is something that I wasn't big on this season. So I'm excited to see it.
We probably have one more season of Numenor without Sauron being in Numenor. So,
Oh, you think?
yes, because the way I've seen people speculate is if next season's war, at some point Sauron gets defeated in that war and surrenders to Numenor and gets captured as prisoner to Numenor. He
Okay.
then he then converts them into supporting Morgoth and himself, and probably with the rings, gets them on board. Then he uses them to try to attack, you know, the elves.
Middle
So,
Lindon.
so there's that. So then that causes the fall of Numenor. So if you're thinking like season 3 is going to be the war and stuff, I think the finale would be he gets caught, and he's the cliffhanger for Sauron is I'm letting myself get captured so I can put my next
Again.
plan into
Again
play.
by Numenor.
Right, right. So I can put my next plan into place, and then I would assume at that point Elendil and Isildur and Anarion and all them are starting to head over back to Middle Earth, and then Pelargir becomes that safe haven for the faithful is what I would assume.
Yep.
Uh, and then season 4 would be him as prisoner, him corrupting the men, and then the downfall of Numenor. And then season 5 is now that Numenor is out of the way, it's the faithful men, the dwarves, the elves, in the last alliance of men, taking on Sauron. So that's kind of how I see this show plotting out at this point.
So then you'd probably think that it would make a lot of sense that maybe all of the rings of man are Numenorians, because like I know we had some thoughts on like maybe Theo, maybe some other characters we've seen in Middle Earth, but if he's going to just be taking full control of Numenor and ultimately leading to the
Well,
downfall.
with Pelargir becoming an outpost to Numenor and not just a colony,
Yeah,
it could be like that's where Kemen's based.
true.
Maybe he gives one to Kemen. Maybe he gives one to Theo. Maybe he gives one. Well, Theo doesn't need one, but maybe now that Kemen is, I would assume, going to be kind of based here, overseeing the build of this area for Pelargir, he gets one before he gets sent out to Numenor. Maybe before Sauron moves over to Numenor. But
So help me out here. When exactly do the ones who have the rings of man, when are they actually turned into the Black Riders? Is it in the Second Age, or does that not even happen until like the third?
It's in the Second Age. No,
It is.
I just saw it earlier. Hold on, I had it here.
Okay.
I almost wrote that one down, but then I was like, no, he's not going to ask about that.
It's always how it goes, right? Yeah, but so I guess I was just mainly curious to know if like he was going to utilize them in this last, this war against the last alliance of man, or if it was like a later down the line thing. But from what you're saying, it sounds like it's going to be a pretty quick sort of thing.
Yeah, I think they'll do it differently because the way that it works is before he's even taken prisoner, which is the year 3262 in the Third Age. In 1800 in the 3262 in the Second Age. In 1800 of the Second Age, Numenorians begin to establish dominions on the coast. Sauron extends his power eastwards, and the shadow falls on Numenor. Rebellion and division of the Numenorians begin in 2251, and about this time, the Nazgul or ring wraiths, slaves of the Nine Rings, first appear. So,
okay.
He's given them to men, I guess, in Middle Earth that then become ring wraiths. I would assume he's going to use in the show some of those in uh in Numenor just to
That's what I
speed
was.
up.
I think it would be sick if he had the nine ring wearers all be in Numenor, and like them turning is like the thing that begins the fall. You know what I mean? Like they just start going sick and like killing all the Numenorians and stuff, and then it ends with, of course, the total downfall and then the flood and all that good stuff. But
Yeah, and of course, in the show version, these nine rings are going to be so much more easily corrupted because of his blood being in there. So there's
yeah,
a little bit of difference with that. But Isildur and Estrid kiss, and she wants to go with him. And this is kind of what causes the divide between him and Kemen again, right? Kemen's like, oh, I can now use this to be like, oh, Loman can't be on here, like, and he's asking for an exception, and he's like, no. So it only ends up being Isildur going to Numenor,
yeah,
and she
yeah.
has to stay behind.
He has a pawn that he can use against Isildur. In addition to just him being the, basically the second in command to Numenor now, because Isildur isn't too happy with him, but he
Yeah.
is able to use that position to be like, all right, back off, kind of sort of thing. There for sure. It was funny though, because right when Estrid walks in, first Isildur has the conversation with Theo, and then Theo
Yeah.
leaves, and Estrid comes in. And
Change your mind?
yeah, I was just picturing the Estrid's husband, like standing outside. You know the meme of the guy at the basketball game in the vest and the plaid, just with the bald
No.
head. Dude, you know
No.
what I'm talking about. Come on.
If you find it, send to me.
Oh, dude, I
But
definitely am. Ah, damn it.
oh, is it like you mean like the guy that's like this?
Yes, he's got his hands on his hips.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just pictured him just standing outside the door. It's like that poor guy. Like he finally finds his wife after all this time, and
I love him though because Kevin comes on. He's like, "Do you know who this is? This is Bronwyn's son Theo." And Kevin's like, "Who's Bronwyn? Who cares?" Like,
you don't know Bronwyn. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, this guy just thinks everybody knows Bronwyn, and he's
That's
like,
more an indictment on you that you don't know Bronwyn.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the actress may have left the show, but we all know Bronwyn.
Yeah,
Okay,
come on, man. You can't
but I
be
just
Middle
love
Earth
that.
not
And
know
then
Bronwyn.
Theo's like, yeah, she was the one that was upholding the end of the deal here, and Kevin's like, oh yeah, that's changed. Like that deal's changing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go to the stores
Okay. Yeah.
and the stranger. So we find out that the stranger, because this might take a while, actually. I have a lot of notes. This is most of my notes are on the stranger.
Okay.
The stranger. Last week, Tom Bombadil says you have to go here for your staff and not go get your friends. This was a test, and this is. We were kind of thinking like, why would Bombadil say this? Like, what does he mean? It turns out to be a test that he chose friendship over power. It kind of proves that he is not like the Dark Wizard, right? He is a good-hearted Istari. So he goes to find Poppy and Nori, and this is where he runs into the Dark Wizard, who protests that it was a name given to him, and it's actually not his intention. He wants to defeat Sauron as well, right?
Yeah.
Like,
which I do think he does, by the way. But I think he wants.
You do? You think you're buying that?
Yeah, but I think the reason he wants to defeat him is so that he can take his power and just do the same exact thing that Sauron wants to do.
Right.
It's like doing. Yeah, he wants to be Sauron. He wants to defeat Sauron, not because he's looking out for the good of Middle Earth. He's like, oh, I kill him. There's a nice power vacuum there, and if I'm the one that takes down the Dark Lord, they're gonna look at me and say, oh, you're the hero, sort of thing, right? Only he's gonna do it using the same methods that Sauron himself uses, which is why we know he's ultimately going to fail. Even whether or not this ends up being Saruman, who knows? But I'll be honest, like all of the.
I have an answer for you. We'll get to it.
Oh, really?
The showrunners have answered this, so we will get to it.
Okay. Oh, give it to me then. I don't even. Yeah.
Let's hold off a little bit. I just
Okay.
want to mention what else he says here. He mentions that the stranger is the one who convinced them that they had to step in and defeat Sauron, and that the stranger then at this point denies joining the Dark Wizard, and he ends up trying to make the store's homestead collapse. The stranger prevents the deaths and saves the stores.
Well, some, the ones with
Yeah,
plot armor got saved.
yeah. I'm sure most of them are saved. I
Most
think
of
their
them, yeah.
houses are gone.
We did see a couple of them get crushed, but in
Oh, okay.
comparison,
Yeah.
I'm sure most of them are still alive.
All right. Dark Wizard does not equal Saruman. We have confirmation.
Yeah. Okay.
So here we go. The interviewer, by the way, Anthony Bresnikan, he used to do a lot of Star Wars stuff for Entertainment Weekly as well. So he's very steeped in nerd
Very
culture.
stooped.
Yes. Uh, so he said the Dark Wizard's interactions with Gandalf, including calling him old friend, has led many to speculate that
That's
he
what I
is
was
in
gonna
fact
say.
Saruman.
All the old friend, like it just felt like, yeah.
So I forget which one said it, but Payne or McKay step in and say, I'll say something on the record. Given the history of Middle Earth, it would be highly, highly, highly improbable that this could be Saruman. Oh, this was McKay that said that.
Okay.
Payne chimed in and said, if not impossible. Now he says the Dark Wizard has an important role to play in the doings of Middle Earth and in the development of our wizard, who is now coming into his own. Tom Bombadil has told him, you're destined to face him and then destined to face Sauron. So the Dark Wizard's fate is not decided and his name is not out there yet, but it would almost defy the laws of gravity and physics for it to be Saruman.
Cool.
So what they're coming up with here is there's two things that they're referencing. One thing Bresnikan points out, seeing the way he roughed up the halflings make me think if it's Saruman, how would he ever regain the trust of Gandalf?
True.
And they said, I think that's a fair observation. Two, partly with that, Saruman is going to lead the White Council, which is partly, trying to bring down Sauron and all of that. It's like, how would they ever trust him if it turns out to be Saruman? So I think it was one of those. I'm not even sure if it was a bait and switch. I think they didn't want people to think Saruman. I think like I think they probably, if that was true, their intention could have been like they probably should have talked to costuming and stuff a little better, because they do put them all in white and he looks like Saruman.
And even the beard looks the same.
Yeah.
They absolutely went out of their way. Even if they didn't want to make you think it was Saruman, they wanted to they wanted the viewer to draw that mental connection to, just because he's going to clearly be so involved with Gandalf. They wanted this to be essentially the Saruman and Gandalf relationship of this show.
Yeah. And I think that might be intentional in the sense of maybe Saruman doesn't always look the way that he looks, and that as he steps closer to the darkness, he looks more like this dark wizard, because this dark wizard has fallen to the dark side as well. Like,
cool.
I could see it being like that as well. That's not something they said. That's just what I'm saying.
That's a great take.
Of
I
course,
like that a lot, actually.
they mention in this that there's 5 of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Tolkien, as Bresnikan says, also made note of only 5 wizards: Gandalf the Grey, Saruman the White, and then Payne chimed in and said, yes, there's Radagast the Brown, and then there's the 2 blue wizards. And that's all we'll say, is what they said.
Okay.
And here's my pitch for you, Ron. It's definitely not Radagast, because Radagast is like a hippie who's talking with animals, living in the woods the whole time. It's one of the blue wizards. And there's conflicting information on when they've arrived. In some of the text, it says all the 5 Astari came around the 3rd age of the year 1000. However, in the Peoples of Middle Earth book, it says that the blue wizards arrived in the 2nd age, around 1600 in the 2nd age, around the time of the forging of the One Ring. And I think this is the interpretation that they're going with, and that their mission was trying to weaken Sauron's forces in the east and southern parts of Middle Earth. We know we are in the east. We are in Rhûn, which is in the east. Whereas the other Istari were focused on the west. It's also uncertain, it says on the Wikipedia, if they failed in their mission. In the unfinished tales of Numenor and Middle Earth, Tolkien writes that indeed, of all of the Astari, only one remained faithful, and that's referring to Gandalf.
Gandalf. Yeah.
Additionally, in letter 211, he said, "What success they had, I do not know, but I fear they failed as Saruman did. Though doubtless in different ways, I suspect they were founders or beginners of secret cults and magic traditions that outlast the fall of Sauron." And we know he is leading acolytes. I think
Yeah.
it's a blue wizard that fell into this cult and creating a cult and ends up using his own power for evil. And I think it's just one of the blues.
So do we get the other blue in this show then, do you think, too, to kind of to help maybe overcome him and like help
That's a good
Gandalf?
question. I don't know. It could be that the other blue is just already out of the picture, or Gandalf is kind of taking the place of the blue because he landed in the east as well, and the other blue's in the west and just irrelevant to the
Okay.
story.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, that's my thought.
Okay, yeah, that's a great thought. I will say, I do hope then, if that is the case, that they don't just be like, they've plotted out the story of all these wizards, and it's like, yeah, then that other blue one was just a hippie loser who died and nobody cared.
Yeah,
Like, like I hope that they introduce this other wizard and like again sort of to be that contrast to the Dark Wizard and help Gandalf be the next one that guides him along this journey, because it really feels like so far this whole thing it's been like Gandalf and blank, like Nori and Poppy
yeah,
got him to this first place, and then he meets Bombadil and Bombadil guides him towards here, and it would be cool if the other blue wizard was the next one, and it's like these series of people that help Gandalf along this journey to find himself and discover who he is and carve out his role in this much bigger sort of scenario that we know he's going to end up being involved in, being the war against Sauron.
yeah. So the stranger's given his name. They start
You
calling him
called it
Grandalf.
Gandalf. Gandalf.
Very Hodor-esque, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually, I think it's a little different than that. I do think I have a line from the J.D. McKay here that says, um, "It's elf with a wand," is what Gandalf means. Okay,
Okay.
so Alf being elf in like Tolkien's writing, and then Gand being wand, which we know when he was looking for his staff. I believe Nori or Poppy says something about a Gand,
Yeah,
and
they do.
so I think it goes. They might be calling him Grand Elf, but I think it's going to shorten to Gandalf because he's going to have his staff, and it's going to be the elf with a wand. Is how they're going to start calling him that. He says things that remind us of his name are ringing bells in his head little by little over the course of the season. As he comes into his own as a character, who am I? What's important to me? The answers are right there waiting for him. Most viewers are probably several episodes ahead of him, is what they said. So, and
Okay.
it looks like the movie staff. I think that's
It
really cool.
oh yeah, dude, another one. Just they went
Yep.
between between the sword and this, they went big on the Lord of the Rings movie props in here. I have a theory on this though, and I
Yeah.
want to gauge you on it a little bit. So the way that they kind of lead you to believe, it's like, yeah, Gandalf, made the choice of friendship over power, and that's what led him to find this staff. But he doesn't actually find the staff until after he parts ways with Nori, and she goes back and she's gonna start her what we assume at this point we're probably going and founding the Shire, but
With the stores. Yeah. I
with the
think she's
story.
going to lead the stores to the Shire. Yeah.
Yes, but it's not until that happens and they part ways that he finds the staff. Part of me wonders if the key was, and he was already separated from Nori, so maybe not, but this was just what popped in my head when I saw this. I'm wondering if he had to part ways with Nori and Poppy, even whether that, entailed saving them or not, I don't know. But it was a thing where it's like the journey from here gets very dangerous and you would be putting them in a lot of harm's way if you kept them wrapped up in this. So it was almost like he had to make the choice to say goodbye to people that he cared about before he was able to fully embrace this next chapter of his journey and find this staff. That's kind of like the vibe that I got from it a little bit.
That's an interesting take. I took it almost as like not to video game it, but like your reward at the end of the mission. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
walks away and he's like, you get like the little Mario sound, like doo doo doo, and it's like, oh, there's
yeah.
my staff. Like
Oh,
this is great.
I
Yeah,
found a long claw. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And then you get like when he's singing with Bombadil, and it scrolls up, and you see the stars he was heading to, and
so
it's
good.
all like very like he's where he needs to be now because of her. That arc is done, right? Like they've fulfilled that story
Yeah,
of I'm gonna help you find this since season one. And I think that's one thing that helps the pacing as well, is that we're 2 seasons in and it feels like we're making progress in the sense of
yes.
like, okay, some of these characters are hitting these points that they need to hit, and they're splitting off because that part's done. We
Which
see
is
it
what
with
Game of Thrones did
Isildur.
really well.
Yeah, we see it with Isildur going back to Numenor and leaving behind the people. We see it with Gandalf leaving Nori and Poppy and going on his own way.
Mhm.
So I think it was more of a you chose the friendship over the power, but also because of that, he is letting her go on her own way too. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be either or. So I really like your
They,
interpretation too.
yeah, it's kind of like they both go hand in hand with each
Yeah,
other. It's like it's not an either or, it's an and. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And then he meets up with old Tom Bombadil, and this song's been stuck in my fucking head all day.
Man, between this and the Agatha song we got earlier this week, it's been a fire week for television show songs.
I had to purchase it. I bought it on
Nice.
iTunes. I have the musical version, which is like the first release version, and then I have the reprise, which is what this one is.
Nice.
And this one has, Rory and Daniel singing like they are in
Nice.
the episode here. And I just want to shout out Beer McCreary too. The work he's done on the show is absolutely incredible. I know him from Battlestar Galactica. He did music for that. I think he did Walking Dead.
That's where I know him from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I first found him from Battlestar Galactica, and he, like, I thought I was going to miss Howard Shore.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being very excited when they announced he's doing the opening theme.
Yeah.
And then Beer McCreary gets at it, and I'm like, oh, I know him. He's a great composer. And then the music he's doing sounds like it fits into the Jackson films that Howard Shore did, but it also just adds like new layers to it. It feels Lord of the Rings music. I also bought the song that ends the episode because it was this very triumphant score that I was like, I need this. He's done a great job, and he always plays like the theme, where it'll be like the one theme that's constantly prevalent throughout the show, and it'll be
But
different
they add
takes on it.
variations to it.
Yes, and it's so good, and it gets stuck in my head too. But most of these lyrics are from actually Tom Bombadil songs in the books. So like the old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow, are from the book, and I've been singing it to my son as I'm trying to get him to sleep because it's stuck in my head.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Starting him off right.
Yeah, exactly. My wife is like, what song is that? I was like, it's from Lord of the Rings, all right?
Our son will be brought up right. Absolutely.
He will be the Lord of the Rings.
The Lord of the Rings. And not in the condescending way, like Celebrate.
Yeah, in the good way, all right?
He will be the Frodo. Yeah.
And I thought that was going to be the end of the episode. Then we still get more. So I thought that was great. Because it like pans up and I'm like, oh, is that the end? No.
Yeah. Oh, what a vibe. I know we talked about this privately too, but goddamn, what I wouldn't have done.
Yes, sitting by the fire.
With the Gandalf pipe just sitting
the
there. The
porcupine teapot. I mean, that's awesome.
You kidding me? I'd be like, hey, Tommy, you pour a little vodka in there,
Yeah. Well, the episode actually ends with like Galadriel waking up, and they're in this valley, right? Elrond has retreated with the remnant of the Noldor and founds the refuge of Imlardis. We'll talk about what that actually is, but that is from the Appendices. That line right there, that's right after Eregion falls. So they take that, they do this, and if you don't know what Imlardis is in English, it is Rivendell. So this will be
Yes.
Rivendell. I'm very excited for it. I mean, of course, it's
If
obvious
you
when you're
couldn't
looking
tell by
at
the
this.
giant waterfall and the river that
Yeah,
runs through it, yes,
I know. Looking at it, I'm like, that's Rivendell, and I
yeah.
had to get confirmation. It was, but
I
it
got
looks great.
chills though. I got chills
Me
during that
too.
moment though, dude. Oh God, this episode just did so much for us movie fans, man. Just
Hmm.
reference after, and not just throwaway reference. Like these are things that are going to be major aspects of the story going forward. Like it just, oh God, I can't say enough, man. I loved it. I really did.
And I wouldn't say it's just for like even like movie fans. Like this is like straight out of the text too, and they did it perfectly.
Yes.
Um, this is and it ends on a triumphant note, which I don't think season one did. So I do think like season
Mhm.
one ended on like the Sauron's going back to
Yeah.
Mordor, and this ends with like, no, we are not going to take this lying down. We are founding a place here. Gilgalad's raising his sword up. The people are cheering. It's like this triumphant note, even though they lost, right? Like, and I think that is what's so striking about it, and why I felt like it just was a really great end. And spoiler alert, it's the thumbnail for this episode is that image, because I was like, this is great.
It was great. And that line, it is not strength that overcomes the darkness, it is
Mm,
light. And just the sun shining down, and it just the prevailing message that rings true through Lord of the Rings, whether we're talking the original trilogy or the Hobbit trilogy or even this, it's just like hope is eternal, man, and hope is what gets you through. And just to have this moment, even in a very serious, heavy time where they're debating on, what do they say? Like, do we be the sword? Do we be the shield? Like, debating war tactics here, but it's like we're going to be okay and we're going to overcome because we have hope. And I think it was a very good message to leave off on. Absolutely.
yeah. So man, absolutely incredible ending. It left me like the music's great too when it goes to credits, and I'm like
Yes.
sitting there, wow, what an episode.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see how they build Rivendell. And you know what I think would be really cool? This is never going to happen, but I would actually think it's really cool if at the end of season five they announce a season six and it's Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh
And
shit.
we just get like these same actors playing Galadriel and Elrond with a new twist of like doing like, because those characters they could film right after it, and they're not supposed to age. So
Yeah.
like they could do that, and then you cast new Aragorn, Legolas, all that kind of stuff, and these characters like Gandalf and Elrond, Galadriel can just roll right into adapting the trilogy. I think that would be really cool. It's not going to happen, but I won't. I kind of want to see it now.
Me too, especially as a show because it would give you so much more time to flesh out that sort of hero's journey. Like
And we could get
even
Bombadil.
yes. Yeah, yeah. And we would actually get Tom Bombadil. But it's just, even in the extended cuts when you're pushing 4+ hours, like you would just have so much more room to flesh out this journey and make it feel, like a journey, even though not at all to poo-poo the original movies or anything because they were
Right,
amazing.
right, right.
But it gives you more space to be able to add to it. And I think that would be fun as hell. Again, not gonna happen, but just that would be sick if they ever did.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, it's a huge commitment for the actors.
Yeah.
But actually, Elrond
They're
and
like Elijah,
Galadriel.
Elijah, bro, dust off. You'll
Yeah,
you're gonna look fucking 30 until you're 80. Just bust bust out the
but I mean,
years.
like the time commitment for like Galadriel and like Gandalf, and like Gandalf would have the most screen time. Like Elrond
Yeah,
doesn't have that much, right? Like, but these actors are already in like a 10-year commitment because we're getting a season every 2 years for
Yeah.
5 seasons. Like by that point, if they do 3 more seasons, that's another 6 years that they would be playing these characters. But
Yeah.
I would absolutely kill for like a season. You only need 3 more seasons. You just do a season a book, 8 episodes. That gives you 8 hours instead of the 4 that the other ones did. And you know, you'd be
Yeah.
cooking, man. I think it'd be
Oh
great.
yeah. 100%.
Because sometimes I'm like now thinking like I keep trying to picture our Elrond in
Yeah.
Rivendell, and I keep picturing Hugo Weaving instead. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
like I kind of want to see Robert Elrond as like the movie Elrond at this point. So
Same.
it'd be cool.
Yeah. No, I agree completely.
All right. Anything else? Any speculation for next season? I know we kind of talked about how I would plot out 3, 4, and 5, but like anything else before we kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, just nothing in particular, man. I mean, next season will likely probably end with the One Ring. We were speculating maybe it'll be this season, but we've got some war to go now. So I think it'll be Sauron's defeat in this upcoming war that ends up being like, okay,
Having him trade it.
yeah. It's like I gotta think outside the box a little bit here. So nothing yet in terms of speculation outside of that. Once we start getting some more cast information, and maybe some story leaks. Again, this is a new, at least for me, the hype, the Rings of Power hype, and the information off season, if you will. This is something that's new to me because I didn't start watching it until this season. So I'm excited, man, and I'm glad we're getting another one. And just in a sort of retrospective way, like you mentioned, this is the first show that we have covered on this show, the Fantasy Folk, which is something that's been a brainchild of ours for a bit, and just the fact that we're here, it feels like this was a very special season of television in a lot of ways, not just in the show itself, but for us personally. And it's been a blast, honestly, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it, and we're gonna keep coverage going on here for like
Yeah.
fantasy stuff. I'm gonna tell them about our idea. So like next week or whenever that releases, we are having an episode where we're going to start transitioning to some Game of Thrones thoughts. But to do that, I came up with an idea of if you're in Westeros, or if you take all the Westeros characters and put them in Middle Earth, who are you making your Fellowship of the Ring with Game of Thrones characters? And I want to say it's not going to be like a draft. I think it's going to be pretty open, strategic. People I'm going to try to come with my list of like who's the ring bearer? Like who do I
Yeah.
trust to be the ring bearer, right?
Mhm.
And like who do I trust around that person, and try to plot that out as best as I can for that episode. And I think it'd be really fun. And if you're listening and that sounds fun, since we're not recorded yet, send in your thoughts to email
Yeah.
fantasyfolkpod@gmail.com or on the Spotify comments or whatever. Like, give us your Game of Thrones characters that you would trust being your 9 Fellowship of the Ring if those characters were in Middle Earth. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And our buddy TJ, Fat Thor from Agents of Fandom, is going to join us for that one too. They were super gracious to have me on their show last week, and let's return the favor and keep the fun going. So we're going to have him join
Yeah.
us for what's going to be a super super fun show, as you mentioned. I can't wait. Keep the ball rolling here.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after that, we'll kind of just talk some Game of Thrones stuff, general
Yeah.
stuff, George R. R. Martin going off on House of the Dragon, all that good stuff. We'll talk about in the weeks after that as we start looking forward to, I think, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms will probably be, I would assume, mid next year. I don't really know.
Summer.
There's no date, but I would think summer next year. So we'll kind of be building to that. And, in December is War of the Rohirrim. So we'll be kind of diving back into Middle Earth with that. And any news that happens regarding this show or any of these fantasy projects.
Or when we don't get
We'll do
news
it.
about Winds of Winter, just anything really.
That's every day. That's every day.
One day,
All
brother.
right.
One day we'll get there.
One day. One day. Well, you can follow us at Fantasy Folk Pod on all of our social medias. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. There's also the link tree in the show notes that you can easily find that stuff if you need to look for it. But yeah, so thank you all for watching and listening along as we discussed Rings of Power. We grew listeners every single week, so thank you so much. Hope you stick around. We'll catch you next time.